I'm Tiffany, 29, female. As a casting director in a city that never sleeps, my life is a carefully managed whirlwind of headshots, auditions, and impossible deadlines. My sanctuary, the one place where the chaos couldn't touch me, was my home, a charming Tory craftsman that had been in my family for generations. It was more than just wood and nails. It was my inheritance, my history, and the place I felt closest to the woman who raised me. But I'm telling this story because on my 29th birthday, I learned that the people I should have been able to trust the most had built my entire life on a foundation of lies. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The house wasn't just a place I lived, it was a part of me. Nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street, it was the last tangible piece of my grandmother, Eleanor. While my parents, Karen and Bob, were always busy building their careers, my mom in real estate and my dad managing a car dealership, it was Grandma Eleanor who had been my anchor. She was the one who attended my school plays, taught me how to bake, and encouraged my dream of working in film. She passed away when I was 19, and the grief was immense. My parents told me she had left the house to me, a final gift to ensure I always had a place to call my own. For 10 years, I believed them without question. I poured my heart and soul into that house. Every weekend was spent tending to the garden Eleanor had planted. Every bonus I earned went into restoring the original hardwood floors or updating the kitchen. It was a labor of love. The scent of old books and lemon polish in the study was the smell of my childhood. The slight creak of the third stair was a familiar song. This house was my fortress of solitude and the headquarters for my future. I worked from the small sunroom overlooking the backyard, finding the perfect actors for countless projects, my career flourishing within those walls. My family dynamic was, for lack of a better word, unbalanced. I was the responsible one. I'd paid my own way through college, landed a competitive internship that grew into my career, and never asked my parents for a dime. My younger sister, Jessica, was the opposite. At 25, she was the struggling artist, a title that seemed to excuse her inability to hold down a steady job or manage her finances. She worked just enough hours as a barista to fund her art supplies, but she was perpetually in some kind of crisis that required a bailout from mom and dad. If it wasn't her rent being late, it was her car breaking down or an unexpected vet bill for the cat she'd impulsively adopted. My parents always obliged. Karen, my mother, would say, "She's just finding her way, Tiffany. Not everyone is as focused as you." My dad, Bob, would just nod and write the check. I tried not to let it bother me. We had different paths, and I was proud of the life I had built for myself, but a part of me always felt the inequity. They celebrated my independence but funded her dependence. Still, I loved my sister and wanted her to be happy. I just wished she would take some responsibility for her own life. The most important legacy my grandmother left, aside from the house, was the community arts non-profit she founded, the Eleanor Vance Project. It was a small organization that provided funding and space for local artists. It was her passion project, born from her belief that art could change lives. After she passed, the role of board chair was passed to me. It was an honor I took seriously. The board, composed of a few of her old friends and some local business owners, met quarterly. We didn't do much, mostly approving small grants, but it kept her memory alive. My parents never showed any interest in it, dismissing it as one of Eleanor's little hobbies. They didn't know that this little hobby held the key to everything. They didn't know that the dusty filing cabinet in the corner of my office, filled with old board meeting minutes and charter documents, was a ticking time bomb. They had forgotten about it completely. And that was their first mistake. I had no idea that my quiet, stable life was about to be demolished, not by a storm or a fire, but by the very people who were supposed to be my biggest protectors. The cracks were there all along. I just hadn't been willing to see them. For my 29th birthday, I decided to throw a small get-together in the backyard. It was a perfect late summer evening. String lights twinkled between the branches of the old oak tree, music played softly, and about 20 of my closest friends, including my colleague Mike, mingled on the lawn. My parents and Jessica were there, smiling and playing the part of a happy, supportive family. My mom, Karen, was in her element, networking with my friends as if they were potential real estate clients. My dad, Bob, manned the grill, flipping burgers and telling his classic, slightly war, not jokes. Jessica floated around, accepting compliments on a painting she'd gifted me, a decent but uninspired abstract canvas. I felt a genuine sense of peace. My career was thriving, I had a wonderful circle of friends, and I was celebrating in the home I loved more than anything. As the sun began to set, my dad clinked a glass for a toast. I beamed, expecting the usual heartfelt, slightly embarrassing birthday speech. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" Bob's voice boomed. He put an arm around my mom. "Karen and I just want to say how incredibly proud we are of Tiffany. She's so independent, so successful. She's built a wonderful life for herself, and we couldn't be happier." I blushed, nodding my thanks. My friends applauded, but then my mom took over and her tone shifted. It became less of a celebration of me and more of a prepared speech, and because Tiffany is so self-sufficient. She began, her real estate agent smile firmly in place. She understands the importance of family. She knows that when one person is strong, they can lift up the others. A strange feeling began to curdle in my stomach. This wasn't a birthday toast. This was a preamble to something else. My eyes darted to Jessica, who was standing beside them, looking down at her shoes with an unreadable expression, as you all know. My mom continued, "This house has been a wonderful home for Tiffany for the last 10 years. But she's in a place where she can afford her own future. Jessica, on the other hand, needs a little stability, a foundation to build her dreams on." The air grew thick with confusion. My friends exchanged uneasy glances. Mike took a step closer to me, a frown creasing his forehead. "So, as our birthday gift to Tiffany," my dad announced, his voice swelling with false generosity, "we are giving her the chance to do something amazing for her sister. We've decided that it's time for Jessica to have this home. We are gifting the house to her." The silence was deafening. It was so quiet I could hear the ice cubes crackling in someone's drink. I stared at my parents, trying to process their words. It felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the air out of my lungs. They were giving my house away, my grandmother's house, my home, to make it worse. My mom then pulled a large manila envelope from her purse. "And it's all official," she chirped, pulling out a document. "We just signed the deed over to Jessica this morning. Happy birthday, sweetie. Now you and your sister can work out the moving details." It was a performance, a cold, calculated, public execution of my life as I knew it. They had done it in front of all my friends to trap me, to make it impossible for me to argue without causing a massive scene and looking like a selfish, ungrateful daughter. My vision blurred with tears of rage and humiliation. I could feel 20 pairs of eyes on me, filled with pity. I looked at Jessica. She finally met my gaze, a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe, in her eyes before she looked away again. She was a willing participant in this ambush. My voice came out as a choked whisper. "What are you talking about? Grandma left the house to me," and my mother's smile tightened. "That's a simplified version of what happened, honey. The estate was complicated. Your father and I were the executors, and we were entrusted to do what was best for the entire family, and this is what's best. They hadn't just given my house away. They were rewriting history, erasing my grandmother's wishes, and telling me my understanding of my own life was a lie. My birthday party had become my public dispossession. The string lights suddenly felt like a cruel mockery, illuminating the wreckage of my trust. My home was no longer my own. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it left me hollowed out, standing alone in the center of my own backyard. The party ended abruptly. My friends, bless them, mumbled their goodbyes and gave me awkward, comforting hugs, not knowing what else to do. Mike stayed behind, his expression a mixture of fury and concern. "Tiffany, what was that? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low. I just shook my head, unable to form words. My parents and Jessica had already retreated inside, acting as if they'd just announced a vacation, not dropped a bomb on my life. I stumbled into the house after them. "You have to be kidding me," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely control. "You can't just give my house away. Don't be so dramatic, Tiffany," my mother said, waving a dismissive hand as she collected empty plates. "We're not throwing you out on the street. We're just asking you to find your own place within a few months. It's time Jessica had her turn. My turn." Jessica mumbled, still avoiding my eyes. "Mom, maybe this was a bad idea." "Nonsense," my father interjected, stepping in front of her like a shield. "Your sister is a successful woman. She can get a mortgage. You can't. This is what your grandmother would have wanted, for us to take care of our own." That was the line that snapped me out of my shock. What Grandma would have wanted. Grandma wanted me to have this house. She told me so 100 times. Telling a child something and putting it in a legally binding will are two different things, Karen said coolly. We were the executors of her estate. We managed everything. You were only 19. You didn't understand the complexities. We've been paying the property taxes from a family account all this time. Legally, the house was ours to manage and ultimately to disperse as we saw fit. Now, the discussion is over. They presented a united, impenetrable front. Their story was polished and rehearsed. According to them, I had been living here out of their generosity, not by right. The narrative of my life, the gift from my grandmother, was a fiction they had allowed me to believe. The next few days were a blur of numb disbelief. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Every room, every object was a reminder of what I was about to lose. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I finally called Mike, my voice cracking over the phone. I don't understand how this is possible. I told him, tears streaming down my face. I feel like I'm going crazy. You're not, he said firmly. Something isn't right here, Tiff. Your parents are good at selling a story. Your dad sells cars and your mom sells houses. But this doesn't add up. Did you ever see the will? I admitted I hadn't. I was a teenager grieving my grandmother. I just trusted what my parents told me. Okay, Mike said, his analyst brain kicking into gear. What documents do you have? Anything your grandmother left you directly. Old papers, letters, anything. His question sparked a memory. In the back of my closet, it was a heavy box filled with Eleanor's personal effects, things my parents had deemed sentimental junk, and told me to sort through years ago. I'd never had the heart to. It felt too final. Now I pulled it out, dust puffing into the air. Inside were photo albums, her favorite novels, and stacks of old letters tied with ribbon. Beneath it all was a collection of manila folders. Most of it was what I expected, old bank statements, receipts, warranties for appliances that were long gone. But then I found a folder labeled Eleanor Vance Project Charter and Bylaws. I opened it, my hands shaking slightly. Inside was the original incorporation document for the non-profit she'd started. I scanned the pages, my eyes glazing over the dense legal text, and then I saw it. It was a clause under a section titled Asset Endowment. It stated, clear as day, that the primary asset of the nonprofit, its founding donation, was the property at my address. My grandmother hadn't just left me the house in a simple will. She had done something far more clever, something she thought would protect it forever. She had placed the house into a trust, naming the nonprofit as the sole beneficiary. My breath caught in my throat. I kept reading. The trust included a specific provision. A family descendant could reside in the house, provided they served as the active chair of the nonprofit's board. If the chair position became vacant or was passed to a non-family member, the house would revert to the full control of the nonprofit, to be used or sold to fund its mission. My parents weren't the owners. They were never the owners. At best, they were the original trustees who were supposed to oversee the arrangement. The fine print didn't say the executors could disperse as they saw fit. It said the exact opposite. It locked the house to the nonprofit, and by extension to me, as long as I held my grandmother's chair. A cold, hard clarity washed over me, replacing the grief and confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, long-conceived deception. They had hidden this from me for a decade, they had lied, and now they had committed fraud by signing over a property that was never theirs to give. I was holding the truth in my hands, hidden in plain sight all this time. The game had just changed. My hands were trembling, but my mind was laser-focused. I immediately called Mike and read him the clause from the trust document. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Tiff, this is a smoking gun, he finally said, his voice laced with awe. They didn't just betray you. They committed a serious felony, maybe multiple. What do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do I call a lawyer? Do I confront them? Not yet, Mike advised, his analytical mind already mapping out the next steps. Confronting them now will just make them lawyer up and hide everything. We need more than just this document. We need the full picture. We need to build an airtight case that proves their intent. You're the board chair, right? You have the right to access all the nonprofit's records, financial statements, meeting minutes, everything. He was right. As the chair, I had the keys to the kingdom. A kingdom my parents had forgotten even existed. The next day, I took a personal day from work and went to the small, dusty office space the non-profit rented in a community center downtown. The filing cabinets were ancient, but the records were surprisingly meticulous, thanks to the elderly treasurer who had been my grandmother's best friend. I spent the entire day, with Mike joining me after work, poring over a decade's worth of files. And the deeper we dug, the uglier the story became. We started with the property records. Using the public database, we found the original deed transfer after my grandmother passed. As executors, my parents had transferred the deed from her name directly into their own names. They completely ignored the existence of the trust and the nonprofit. It was a fraudulent transfer, plain and simple. They had effectively stolen the house 10 years ago. Then we moved to the nonprofit's financial records. They told an even more sickening story. My parents, as the original trustees, had access to the property's title. We cross-referenced the property address with county financial records and discovered they had taken out a home equity line of credit against the house 7 years ago, a loan for $50,000. What did they need 50 grand for? I wondered aloud, scrolling through the documents on Mike's laptop. He pulled up the nonprofit's bank statements from that same year. Let's see, he murmured, his fingers flying across the keyboard. According to these statements, the nonprofit's account was almost empty that year. The endowment wasn't performing well. They had to cancel the annual arts grant. He paused, then looked at me, but I bet I know who wasn't struggling. He was right. We then looked at my parents' personal finances, which we could piece together through other public records and some educated guesses. That was the year my dad bought himself a new luxury car. It was the same year they paid for Jessica to attend a ridiculously expensive summer art program in Europe after she dropped out of college. They hadn't just stolen the house, they had been bleeding it dry, using a nonprofit's primary asset as their personal piggy bank. They had deprived local artists of grants, the very thing my grandmother wanted to support, to fund their lifestyle and enable my sister. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when we examined the board meeting minutes from the year after Alina's death. The first meeting after I was appointed chair was brief. The minutes, typed up by my mother, who was acting as secretary at the time, were vague. They noted my appointment and then stated, "The board confirms the Vance family executors will continue to manage the endowment's real estate assets." That was it. They had buried their power grab in a single, innocuous-sounding sentence that a 19-year-old me would never have questioned. They had counted on my grief, my youth, and my trust. They had used my love for my grandmother against me. By the end of the night, we had a mountain of evidence. Printouts of illegal deed transfers, bank statements showing the secret loan, and copies of the nonprofit's bylaws that my parents had blatantly ignored. They leveraged an asset that wasn't theirs, deprived the nonprofit of its security, and then illegally gifted that stolen asset to your sister. Mike summarized, shaking his head in disgust. And your mom being a real estate agent makes it so much worse. She knew exactly what she was doing every step of the way. This isn't just unethical, it's professional misconduct on a massive scale. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound, but now it was accompanied by a righteous anger. They had underestimated me. They saw me as the quiet, responsible daughter who would just accept her fate. They never imagined I would go digging through dusty old files. They had forgotten that my grandmother didn't just give me her house, she gave me her strength too. It was time to stop being their victim and start planning my response. For the next week, I lived a double life. At home, I was quiet and compliant. I started packing a few boxes, allowing my parents and Jessica to think I was accepting my fate. I overheard my mother on the phone with one of her friends, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Yes, it's hard on Tiffany, but she'll see it's for the best. She's strong, she'll bounce back." They were patting themselves on the back for their supposed generosity, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. Meanwhile, every evening was spent in Mike's apartment, which had become our war room. We had all the evidence laid out on his dining table, the original trust document, the fraudulent deed transfers, the home equity loan statements, and the falsified board meeting minutes. The sheer audacity of their decade-long deception was breathtaking. We could go straight to the police. Mike said one night, tapping a pen against the loan agreement, "Fraud, embezzlement. The district attorney would have a field day." I considered it. A part of me, the part that felt so deeply wounded, wanted to see them face public consequences, but another part of me knew that wasn't the right path. A public legal battle would be a messy, protracted war. It would drag my grandmother's name, her legacy, and her beloved nonprofit through the mud. It would become a spectacle, and my family, for all their faults, would paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking to destroy them. They were masters of spinning a narrative. I couldn't let them control this one. No, I said, my voice firm. This isn't about sending them to jail. This is about justice. It's about restoring what they stole and protecting my grandmother's legacy. We can't do that with a scorched earth approach. So what's the alternative? Mike asked. We use their own tactics against them. I explained, an idea beginning to form. They value appearances above all else. My mother's reputation as a top real estate agent, my father's image as a respected local businessman. Their standing in the community is their weak point. We don't threaten them with prison. We threaten them with something they fear more, public humiliation and professional ruin. The plan was simple, yet devastating. We weren't going to sue them, at least not yet. We were going to leverage the one thing they had forgotten about, the Eleanor Vance project. I'm the board chair. I said, I have the authority to call an emergency board meeting, and I'm going to call one. Mike's eyes lit up as he understood at the house. Exactly. I confirmed. I'll send a formal meeting notice via certified mail to all board members. I'll also send one to my parents, as the managers of the real estate assets as noted in their own fabricated minutes, and I'll send one to Jessica, as the current illegal occupant of said asset. Attendance will be mandatory. The core of our plan rested on the original trust document, the one document they thought was irrelevant, a relic of the past. It was the foundation of everything, the legal instrument that invalidated every single action they had taken over the past 10 years. Over the next few days, we prepared meticulously. Mike helped me create a professional, damning presentation. We scanned every piece of evidence, the trust, the deeds, the loan documents, the bank statements showing how the loan money coincided with their personal splurges. We created a clear timeline of their deceit from the moment my grandmother passed to the disastrous birthday party. Each slide was a nail in the coffin of their lies. I also consulted with a lawyer Mike knew, just to confirm our position. The lawyer was astounded. He confirmed that the initial deed transfer was fraudulent and that my mother's real estate license would be in serious jeopardy if this ever came to light. The home equity loan was bank fraud. The entire charade was a house of cards, and we were about to pull out the bottom one. Sending out the certified letters was the most nerve-wracking part. It was the point of no return. My mother called me the moment she received hers, her voice a mix of confusion and irritation. What is this, Tiffany? An emergency board meeting? What's the agenda? I kept my voice calm and professional. The agenda is a review of the nonprofit's primary asset. As the property is currently occupied by a non-board member and its ownership is in question, the review is urgent. I expect you, Dad, and Jessica to be there. 7 o'clock Friday night. I could hear the gears turning in her head, but she still didn't grasp the full extent of her predicament. This is ridiculous. It's just a house. We'll be there, but I don't see why this couldn't be a phone call. It requires a formal presentation. I said, a hint of steel in my voice. Don't be late. I hung up, my heart pounding. For 10 years, they had held all the power. They had controlled the narrative, the finances, and my sense of security, but now, armed with the truth, I was finally ready to take that power back. The stage was set for a confrontation, not in a courtroom, but in the living room of the house that should have been mine all along. Friday night arrived with a tense, electric stillness. I had spent the afternoon setting up the living room not as a home, but as a boardroom. I moved the comfortable sofa and armchairs to the walls, replacing them with a long folding table and several straight-backed chairs. At the head of the table was my laptop, connected to a projector aimed at the large, blank wall above the fireplace. Mike was by my side, dressed in a suit, looking every bit the professional financial advisor he was pretending to be for the board. The other board members, 2 elderly friends of my grandmother, had arrived early, looking concerned and confused by the sudden urgency. My parents and Jessica were the last to arrive. They walked in with an air of annoyance, clearly viewing this as a dramatic overreaction on my part. All right, Tiffany, we're here. My dad, Bob, said gruffly, looking around the rearranged room with disdain. Can we get this over with? I'm missing the game. Please have a seat, I said, my voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I gestured to the 3 chairs we had set up opposite me and Mike. Jessica looked nervous, but my parents sat down with an air of impatient authority. I took my place at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming. I've called this emergency meeting of the Eleanor Vance project to discuss a grave issue regarding the organization's foundational asset. My mother, Karen, scoffed. Tiffany, for heaven's sake, it's the house. We gave it to Jessica. It's a family matter, not a nonprofit issue. That's where you're mistaken, I said, clicking the first slide on the projector. The scanned image of the original trust document filled the wall. I had highlighted the relevant sections in yellow. According to the nonprofit's founding charter and trust, this house was never a simple family asset. It was and is the legal property of the Eleanor Vance Project. The room went silent. My parents stared at the document on the wall. I saw a flicker of recognition, then panic in my mother's eyes. She remembered. I walked them through it, my voice steady and clear. Grandma Eleanor placed the house in a protective trust to ensure the non-prof. It would always have a primary asset. The trust stipulates that I, as her descendant and the board chair, am permitted to reside here. It does not, under any circumstances, grant ownership or control to the estate's executors. I clicked to the next slide. It showed the deed transfer from 2015, where they signed the house from my grandmother's estate to their own names. This document, I said, pointing the laser at the signatures, is fraudulent. You transferred an asset you had no legal right to transfer. My father started to speak, sputtering now. Wait a minute, I'm not finished. I cut him off, my tone sharp. I clicked again. The home equity loan agreement appeared on the wall. $50,000. Taken out against a property you didn't own. I believe the legal term for that is bank fraud. Karen went pale. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. The final slides were the most damning. I showed the nonprofit's depleted bank statements from that year, followed by records of my dad's new car purchase and the payment for Jessica's trip to Europe. It was a clear, undeniable line from their theft to their personal gain. You didn't just steal from me, I said, my voice thick with emotion as I looked directly at them. You stole from my grandmother's legacy. You stole from the community artists this non-prof it was created to support. You stole all of it to fund your lifestyle, and you used me and my trust in you as cover. The two other board members looked horrified, staring at my parents with utter contempt. The truth was out, raw and undeniable, projected in black and white for everyone to see. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. So here are your options, I said, my voice now cold as ice. Option 1. You immediately sign a quitclaim deed, transferring the property title back to the trust where it belongs. You will also draft a repayment plan for the $50,000 you stole from its equity. Jessica will vacate the premises within 48 hours. In return for this, the board will consider the matter closed, and no criminal charges will be filed. I paused, letting the offer of mercy sink in. Option 2. I continued, you refuse. And tomorrow morning, this entire file, I tapped the thick folder in front of me, goes to the district attorney's office. A second copy goes to the state real estate licensing board. Mom, I can't imagine they'd let you keep your license after learning you committed felony property fraud. And Dad, I'm sure your boss would love to hear his star manager is facing embezzlement charges. The choice is yours. It was over. Their faces crumbled. The arrogance, the condescension, it all evaporated, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated terror of being caught. There was no argument, no defense. They were trapped by their own greed. My father, the big, confident car salesman, looked small and broken. He just nodded, unable to speak. My mother, for the first time in my life, looked at me with something other than dismissive pride. It was fear. We'll sign. She whispered, her voice hoarse. We'll sign. The signing of the documents was a somber, silent affair. Mike had prepared everything in advance. My parents, looking defeated and aged by a decade in a single hour, signed the quitclaim deed and the personal loan agreement to repay the nonprofit. Their hands trembled as they passed the pen back and forth. Jessica sat beside them, crying quietly, refusing to look at anyone. When it was done, they left without another word. The confrontation I had dreaded for weeks was over in minutes, not with a bang, but with the quiet scratch of a pen on paper. The following day, a moving truck pulled up to the curb. Jessica, with the help of a few of her friends, moved things out. Before she left, she approached me at the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. Tiff, I am so sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I knew it was wrong. I always felt so far behind you, and when Mom and Dad offered me this chance to have something real. I was weak. I never wanted to hurt you. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. For a moment, I saw past the entitled artist and saw my little sister, lost and easily manipulated by our parents' toxic games. I know, Jess, I said, my anger softening into a sad resignation. They put you in an impossible position. Go take care of yourself. For real this time. She nodded, gave me a brief, tearful hug, and walked away. It was the first step toward a future where she might finally stand on her own 2 feet. My relationship with my parents, however, was irrevocably shattered. There was no apology, no attempt to explain. They went into damage control mode, cutting off all contact with me. I learned through the grapevine that they told their friends a sanitized version of the story, that there was a legal complication with the estate and that I had forced them to sign the house back over. They painted themselves as the victims of my greed. It hurt, but it no longer had power over me. I knew the truth. In the weeks and months that followed, a profound sense of peace settled over me and the house. It was truly mine now, not just in title, but in spirit. I had defended it. I had honored my grandmother's wishes. The silence left by my family was soon filled with new life. I threw myself into reviving the Eleanor Vance project. With the repayment plan from my parents providing a steady influx of funds, we were able to restore the annual arts grant and then expand it. We started workshops, hosted gallery nights, upend coming artists, and turned the non-profit from a forgotten hobby into a vibrant part of the community. The house itself felt different, lighter. It was no longer just a sanctuary from my work. It became an extension of it. I hosted board meetings in the living room and held fundraisers in the backyard under the same twinkling lights that had once illuminated my deepest betrayal. My work as a casting director felt more meaningful, too. The experience had sharpened my instincts, my ability to see beneath the surface of the characters people played in their daily lives. I had faced the ultimate manipulators and won. One evening, about a year later, I was sitting in the sunroom, reviewing headshots for a new film. The light was fading, casting long shadows across the lawn where my grandmother's roses were in full bloom. I felt her presence then, not as a sad memory, but as a source of quiet strength. My parents had tried to take her gift away, but in doing so, they had given me a greater one, the knowledge that I was stronger than I ever imagined. I had reclaimed more than just a house. I had reclaimed my story, my independence, and my future, building it on a new foundation, one of truth, resilience, and my own unwavering strength.